Hey, Aya, good morning.
Hi, Nick.
How's it going over there?
Doing fine. It's hot here in the Philippines as usual, even if it's
Oh my,
already 12 a.m.
what's it like?
It's right now it's 28 degrees Celsius. So that's how many in Fahrenheit. It's so hot.
Oh my God, I love it. See, I love the heat. I love the heat. I hate the cold. Um, Hold on, let me look up. Let me do that transit. You said how many degrees?
28.
What's 28 degrees Celsius in Fahrenheit?
20 degrees Celsius.
Oh, it's 68 degrees. Oh wait, no, it's 20. Okay, sorry. Hold on. I was gonna make fun of you for a minute, but I can't. 82. That's perfect. That's a perfect temperature. Aya,
For
just put on
you.
your shorts. Oh
Sometimes
God, that's
if
like
it's already 12 noon here in the Philippines, it's around, or in my area, it's around 30 degrees Celsius. So that's how many, right? It's
oh,
so hot.
I
Um,
love it. What do you get to do when it's like that? Do you just go for walks? Do you have a pool or a community pool, or how does that work?
well, sometimes we go to mall, but sometimes, most of the time, I just stay in my room.
Gotcha. Yeah, with the do you have air conditioning?
Yep.
Yeah, understood. That's what the people in Florida do as well.
Right, right.
That is awesome. Can you make us co-hosts, Aya? I'm going to be sharing my screen today.
I did.
Oh, fantastic. Steve is on. Janine is on. Daniel and Azo is on. Stephen Bowie is checking in. Steve Bowie did a fantastic go-giver move last night. Anthony had some car trouble, and I was able to get my mechanic involved. And then Steve offered to drive him all the way home last night. That was awesome, Steve. Thank you for that.
Very cool.
Yeah,
People helping people is powerful stuff.
it is indeed. Yeah, and there's no hesitation. He was like, "Oh, I live 20 minutes from there. I'll take you home." It was awesome. Nice work, Steve.
But did you get your Wendy's, Steve?
I got it after. I didn't want to bring him along with me because it was kind of late, so I just went. I went there after.
Anthony, you would have appreciated some Wendy's last night. Yeah,
Probably would have.
would have been great. Would have been great. It's great to see
Was
everybody
that
today. Small
was
group
that your,
today.
your night last night?
Oh, go ahead. Sorry, Anthony. What?
Oh, I was just saying, did you grab Wendy's on your way home last night? Is that where this
That's
comes
what
from?
That was Steve's dream. No, Steve wanted to grab Wendy's, and he
Oh
said he was too embarrassed to take you because he thought you would judge him, so he didn't go.
no,
Yeah, I
he
literally
would have been, yeah,
I sped there right after.
nice.
Steve, I think all your junk food is still at the AA office.
Oh yeah,
Are those the chocolate pretzels that I ate yesterday? I found those on the desk.
Was at the AA office.
What? That's hilarious.
That's
Chocolate
funny.
pretzels are gone. That's all right. 12:03. Let's give one more minute for people to chime in here. Um, cool. For those of you who were at the event last night, what was any good takeaways? What was your takeaway, Janine?
It was really helpful knowing the reason why we can't wholesale to an end buyer, because I've always wondered that, but I never understood why. So that was really helpful for me for sure. And then a lot of the lending tips and information that Mario gave, including that sheet that he passed out, was awesome.
Mm,
Well, I don't think that we can't, right? I think it's just
Right.
Nick has the
Could, but it's really complicated and you have to make a big spread and account for a lot of money to go out to wholesale to that person.
yeah. I'm doing it right
yeah,
now, and I definitely need some help on it.
Hmm.
yeah. Is it you doing an ovation, Anthony, or are you doing just straight
Well,
back to back?
that's the thing is it's gonna have to turn into some version of innovation. It's just
Yeah.
not not kind of the way I've thought of them. So we'll have to discuss that more.
Yeah. It is doable, Janine. But yeah, the bottom line, right? What Pace doesn't tell you is that the end buyer's money controls the whole deal. the end buyer's lender and their attorney. They'll control everything. So if it's an FHA, you're on the terms of residential mortgage lending, right? So you have to make sure you meet every single box for that to check off. And they typically won't fund assignment fees. And you might have to play with the name of, your vendor in the transaction, right? Making sure they know what value you brought to the table. It's doable. It's certainly doable. That power of attorney way of doing it though is no longer valid. If you're being taught that way, POA is what Megan had a biggest issue with, right? Is like, oh, the seller wants to go to Florida, and I gotta tell you guys this too. I know we're recorded, but I'm pretty sure one of the people, that was sued by a sub-2 seller was in the audience last night.
Yeah,
And yeah, you saw that. Yeah, so Meg was very careful too with what she was saying, because that was one of the whole reasons she stopped doing sub-2. Was that deal, that and 3 other deals. So it's all about how you handle the transaction. But Novation certainly we'll probably do. We had Eric Brewer on the podcast, so and we're getting him to make a relationship with Ignition and Accelerated. So he's going to offer his course. I don't know if it's going to be at a discount or we're going to get him to do like a watered down version for free, and just have that as part of the library, digital course library. So that should help, because Novations have changed so much that he now calls it the Brewer method, which there's no ego in that whatsoever. The Allerud method, the Milanazzo method, the Whitaker method, it's all good. There's no ego in naming stuff.
I'm glad you interviewed him, because I was watching a bunch of his stuff a while back and totally forgot about him until you mentioned him recently. And I remember he had a lot of good information.
He's a good dude. We go way back. He's a good guy. Perfect. All right, Steve. Well, we got a small group today. Do you want to start for 15 minutes, 20 minutes or so?
Yeah, so we're going to do a check-in, but to start, I'm going to go top right and move around clockwise. One word to describe yourself today. Janine.
Happy.
Jack is on the phone. Dan.
Different.
Different. Anthony.
I don't know. Puzzled.
Puzzled. Okay. Christina, one word to describe yourself today.
Tired.
Tired. Nick, one word to describe yourself today.
Refreshed.
Refreshed. Fired up. I've got 2 words. Steve Bowie, one word to describe yourself today.
I have more than 2 words. Questioning where I am.
Okay, questioning. Jack, one word to describe yourself today. Are you still on the phone?
Geez, I got a bunch of them today, man. Positive. That's as fast. That's as easy as I can water it down. I never shut up. So.
Yeah, that's kind of the point of this exercise, is just to come up with one word, because we like to overcomplicate things, overthink things, over embellish, like long drawn out conversations about what we're actually feeling, where you could actually probably just do it with one word. Same with business. We like to overcomplicate things, and it's just solving the problem of one thing, the next thing in front of us. Okay, so that was a simple check-in. Let's go back to Anthony. You said puzzled.
Yes, sir.
What are you puzzled about?
A lot of different things happening right now. A lot of, if you asked me yesterday or 2 days ago, it would be extremely negative.
Yeah.
And a couple of things are moving around, and some crazy generosity from pretty much everyone on the screen right now. It's kind of changing some of that stuff. So kind of trying to figure out how to feel and what the hell I'm doing. So I don't know if that was too vague, but
No, that's beautiful. And tell us where you are, right? Gordon's on the phone. Richard. Richard's here. Christina, you said tired. Is that right?
Yeah. Yes.
What are you tired from?
My children.
Well,
I
welcome
know
to
I
it.
say it all the time, but Blake was up like 3 times last night because he needed me. So there I was.
There you are. That's the gift that keeps on giving.
Sure is.
Steve Bowie, you had questioning. What are you questioning?
Yeah, so I said questioning where I am. So just my current status and what I'm doing in my real estate business, and where I want to be, especially going to these networking events and meeting all these other people and getting their, getting their scope of knowledge and what they're currently doing and seeing what piques my interest. So it's been a process of rethinking what I want to do.
So is what you're doing right now not working?
It's working. I just don't enjoy it as much as what I'm hearing from other investors.
Yeah. So do you think that's grass is greener on the other side of the fence kind of thing, or
The comparison game.
the comparison game, or is it just literally you think your skills and talents might be better utilized in a different area? And you don't have to answer that.
Yeah,
you can
I would say both, kind of the comparison game, but also where I would thrive better if I put myself in a better or in a different situation that's still aligned with what I'm doing now. An example is last week I went to a site, a fix and flip that one of these guys I met at a networking event was doing. So I stopped by there and I saw him, being very hands-on and laying down some LVP, and it was much more than what I'm doing right now, is just cold calling and kind of just sitting here and doing that for the bulk of my day. And I kind of want to be out there as well, getting, the firsthand experience and, being more active, working and not being confined to a desk.
That's beautiful. So what would be the quickest thing you could do to continue the cold calling without you doing it?
Quickest thing I can do. I definitely want to connect more with them and, attend or visit more
No, back
sites.
up.
And
So you're doing all the cold calling right now, right?
right.
So what would it take for you not to be cold calling, being out in the field, doing more hands-on stuff, but still be able to have your cold calling being done for you? What could you do?
Yeah, that's kind of what I've been questioning. I mean, I kind of want to do both.
Yeah, but so then you could split your time, right? So that would be your goal, your metric for second quarter is how quickly can I get a VA in place that I can train to do the cold calling that I'm doing to have the success that I'm having, so that I can move on to do other things that I want to do. That's scaling.
Right.
And to have the control. So to put more context on it, right? Steve has recently aligned with another company. So he's working as a caller for another real estate investment firm.
Oh, so
And
it's
so
not
he's
okay. I thought it was your.
He's now looking around saying, was that the right move? Right. And I think we talked to Steve on the one-on-one, right? What does your gut tell you?
Got it. I was thinking it was your own business. I apologize. That's what assuming does.
Well, it actually is a fantastic advice though, Steve, because maybe Steve, you just have to hire the right VA that they haven't found yet, and they can make the cold calls. You can say you were making the cold calls, and it's all going to be great. You can go run your own projects. No, I'm kidding. You shouldn't do it. Yeah. But that's what you guys see that it's there's a guy at Verizon. I don't know, Steve, you ever heard of this story? Guy at Verizon, he was a high up executive, and he got there because the 4 jobs he had previously, every time he would just assign tasks, he would they somehow allowed like one of those AnyDesks or something. He would outsource every one of his tasks to an offshore team. Through the working on the mainframe, whatever it was, IT and sales, making sure that the sales was taken care of, and he would just work those leads. And finally, it was a tech background. He had some guy performing and maintaining all of these computer programs at Verizon. And finally, someone realized, right, that all this information had been leaked to these third-party virtual offshore teams. But he had become so successful and had saved the company billions of dollars in revenue that they said, hey, we have to let you go because of everything you've done, but we're going to keep you on as a consultant and pay you to, not fuck this up for the next 3 years. Pretty good. The guy went, I don't know, resourcefulness is a thing.
I wonder if you could approach your company and be like, hey, can I train a VA to help me with my cold calling so I can be out in the field? Hey, never ask a question. I'll pay for them. Just kidding. But
I love it.
So yeah, what would it take for you to do what you actually want to do?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know where I want to be at. I definitely want to be more hands-on and be out in the field. I kind of just want to like allocate all of my time into doing that, because I hate cold calling and just sitting here. And I'm sure everyone does. And I just can't like sit here for a very long period of time and just, sit on the dialer and just make calls. I really want to be out there just moving and exercising, getting these firsthand skills and experience. So that's kind of where, as Nick said, like that's what's telling me, my thoughts and where I want to be.
Cool.
Steve, would you consider doing door knocking in Worcester?
Yeah, I mean that's better than sitting at my desk to make
I got
calls. As long as I'm
a job.
up there
I got
moving.
a job for you, brother. Me and you, Worcester. No, door
Sure.
knocking.
There you go.
I'll contact you after.
Okay.
Love it. Problem
And Steve,
solved.
if you want to lay some LVP, I got a whole bunch of apartment units you can lay LVP for.
Yeah, if you want to lay some floor, come down here. We got a lake house we're working on. Got to have the flooring done. We got plans.
I was gonna say, Steve, you can relocate to Greenville real quick. We'll put you to work. No big deal, man.
The
All
voice.
these
is-
opportunities.
You hear the voice there, Steve? The voice just spoke to you.
It's the
The
voice.
voice from above.
Voice. Listen to the voice. But no, in all seriousness, that's great stuff. I mean, I think we all go through that. Like, what do we want? How do we want? Is this working? Is this not working? And if something's not working for you, like just don't keep doing the same thing and expecting a different result, right? Yeah. So that's beautiful, bringing that to the table. Thank you, Nick. I know you've got a very tactical coaching today, so I'm going to hand off and let you just.
You can't. We
get it-
do have two
get it-
others though. Two others who joined up. I just want to have their one-word feelings.
Oh, okay.
Dickens
Dickens
joined up.
Who's the other person that joined?
Alan Knowles joined us.
Oh, I can't see.
Dickens, we're doing one word of feelings. How are you feeling today? Using one word only. You are muted, my friend.
Grateful.
Grateful.
Beautiful.
Good one.
Alan
Knowles,
Knowles,
can you hear us?
I think he's on mute. There he goes. One word to describe yourself today, Alan.
One word. Wow. Let's see.
He's a lawyer. That's
Alacrity.
impossible.
That's true. That's true. Thanks for giving me that out, Jack. But I'll go with alacrity, which for anyone not familiar with that term, it's one of my favorite words. It means cheerful eagerness.
Sweet. Beautiful.
Hmm.
And I think that's because of the sunshine, the spring, all those good things. A birthday coming up. Everything good happens in the spring as far as I'm concerned, so. And the market too, hopefully. Traditionally, that's a good time, so.
New
Looking
beginnings.
for, yep, looking for good things. That's it. That's traditionally, right, you're historically, physically, geographic, it's all new beginnings. Yep, so I'll go with that.
Beautiful. All right, you guys, at long last, I know a lot of you guys have been asking a lot of these questions, and I know some of you already have this document.
Hey,
Can you all see my
before you
screen?
get into that, can I talk about my feelings really quickly?
No, fuck your feelings. No one gives a shit.
That's what I was gonna say. Fuck all of your feelings. No one gives a shit. Shut up and just go do something. My God, what did I hop onto here? Happy clappy jerky session? What the hell are we talking about here? Are we gonna figure out like what you want out of your life, and then you're gonna actually put a plan in place to go after what you want, no matter how you feel, no matter how you wake up, and you're so laser locked in to what you want that it doesn't matter what your feelings are telling you, you're gonna still show up and do it.
I thought
So that's
Southerners
what's
was
behind
supposed
me
to
on
be
the
next
wall, but
night.
Forward.
I'd like
Is
Steve.
that part of
This
the
is
Southern?
your partner, Steve Leach Gordon, is who brought this exercise up, saying instead of having people ramble on, let's have one word feelings today. That was all it was.
That's fine. I don't care who brought it up. Doesn't matter. Like, I'm just telling you my feelings on it right now. That's all.
Oh, your feelings. Steve, you're muted.
If you're muted.
I need to be muted.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it.
Jesus Christ.
You guys can all see.
Unfortunately, I didn't hear his feelings, unfortunately, what he said, but I'm pretty sure when he's swimming in the middle of an ocean, his feelings aren't going to help him out.
There's the pieces. Go ahead, Steve. One last rebuttal.
No, I just appreciate everything Gordon has to say.
That is true. That is true. For those of you who can see my screen, I have our logo behind us, right? Which absolutely serves us more of the time than it does not, right? This is when the excuses start in our heads. And it's okay to be unknowing right now, Steve. It's okay to feel different, Dan Milanazzo, right? It's okay to feel all these things. And at the same time, all of it, the feeling is a piece of this, right? We're humans, we have emotions, we have thoughts. Where is the voice within that? And what are they telling us to do? Regardless of how hard it is, because the voice only gives us hard shit. It doesn't give us anything easy, right? If I drop my pen, I get to pick up my pen. If I am unhappy with where I am and what I'm doing, it means that I have to make some really tough calls, really tough choices, and have some really tough conversations, right? So Steve Bowie, maybe it won't be comfortable for you to have a conversation with your new employers, right? Maybe it's uncomfortable for you. And I also think maybe you shouldn't also entertain an immediate quote unquote partnership offer with anybody else until you get your own thoughts onto a whiteboard or a piece of paper as to what it is you want. And if it's, as we talked in our one-on-one, if it's exploratory, if you're still discovering, put out what you want to explore and discover. And what are the action steps to take to really see that through, right? But the longer you wait, the more you're just going to feel in that state of indecision, which is the worst place. You guys ever read the Dr. Seuss book, Places We'll Go? It's a fantastic book. There's 3 pages in it called The Horrible, Horrible Place Called The Waiting Place. Waiting for things to happen, waiting for others to make decisions, waiting for others to plan and I can follow along, waiting for shit. You know, that's where the shut up and do it comes from. So you guys have this. Anyway, today is tactical. Let's do a transition. It's 12:24. We've got a solid 35 minutes for you folks with a beautiful piece of paper, a lot of, oh, gee, we got some chat going on. Has used VAs as someone has texting for you. Yep, Dan uses Lead Mining Pros. Yeah, so no matter what, I'll address this too, just from my experience, Gene. So we have used 5 different call centers. We've used 3 different texting services. Here's the bottom line for all of you guys that want to outsource your call. right? Will you get the same results as if you were making the calls? Maybe, maybe not. Depends on your skill level, right? But here, cold calls and VAs, right? They are working for someone else, and they're working to get their own, they're working to put in the hours, or putting in the dials, and a lot of them are rewarded and should be incentivized to get conversations and get leads, right? But will they have the same close rate, or will they have the same filter rate as you or someone on your team does? Depending on how you train them, depending on if you put them through the John Martinez training, depending on how you have your own scripts, depending. So the answer typically is, once you have resources coming in, you expect and have a loss of conversion ratio by outsourcing the initial cold call. The initial cold call, remember, is just to get a seller to raise their hand saying, yes, I'm interested in selling. It's not a conversion conversation. It's not a, let's, it's assessing motivation, getting some details, but just saying, yes, I could be interested in selling. I'm interested in talking to the principal. That's all it is. So from there, you still have to be one, it's hard to outsource the entire thing. You can scale once you get to a place where you have the income, right? And we get the lead managers, we get the acquisition reps, we can outsource texting services, right? Go High Level does texting, right? Lead Sherpa was one place that we use that does texting. But as we already saw, texting, unless you're doing one at a time, you can't do batch texts anymore, right? And you also have to now refresh our phone numbers constantly so that they don't get marked as spam and they become completely inactive and not deliverable. There's a lot of that. So the one-offs, that's why a lot of you guys are using the CRM that Rick built, right? The one-off texting, and he's making sure you guys are aware to keep refreshing some phone numbers. I mean, that's the best way. You want to use your cell phone for that. If you want to use Google Voice number for that, that's still the best way. Do you want to outsource that to one of your VAs? That might be a way to do it. That might be a way to do it. They have to have a VPN, virtual private. We're getting way off fucking track, but all right, no putting shit in this chat. I have ADD. Very easy for me to get distracted.
Sorry.
Okay, Janine, you're awesome. All right, let's do this, you guys. All right, and we are recording this, yeah? Are you there?
It's being recorded. I got a notification.
Cool. I'm on a new laptop and I can't see any of that. Okay, brilliant. So a lot of you have seen this. Maybe some of you have not, but we've gotten a lot of questions recently, right? How do we set up the purchase contract when we're meeting with the seller? So let's go over the first big hot question, which in Massachusetts specifically, Massachusetts is the only state in the entire freaking country that has a two-stage offer process, an offer to purchase and then the purchase and sale agreement. For those of you in agency, you already know, typically there's a 7 to 10 to 14 day lag from when an offer to purchase is signed. It then goes to an attorney. They draft the purchase and sale agreement. While they're doing that, the inspection is happening, right? And then it goes to get the purchase and sale drafted. So it's stupid. What it does is, because Massachusetts is an attorney state and there are more attorneys than there are doctors, than there are plumbers or electricians in Massachusetts, they need to protect themselves and have an extra fee typically if you're using one of the attorneys that charges a fee for service or hourly. So what we're going to do today is understand that whatever state you're in, you can go straight to purchase and sale agreement. You can choose to use your...
Why is it that Massachusetts does that? Alan Knowles, do you know why is it that Massachusetts is a state that does that? I'm curious, quite curious actually. Any idea?
That's a good question, Gordon. I'm not sure, but I'm sure some of it is because, like Nick said, there's so many attorneys, and so many attorneys are also part of the legislature. So, it may be that they're altruistic and they're really trying to protect people, but then again, there's a bit of a, self.
Indeed. I'm also going to ask you if you can activate the Fathom thing. I see Derek's coming in. Fathom will help us index this call. That'll be cool. So hopefully she can hear me. No, now we're getting inundated by other Fathoms. Jesus, Fathoms are everywhere. Derek, I give up. You can have eight Fathoms are entering the chat. All right. Going back to this. So yes, you can use the purchase and sale and you can go straight to purchase and sale. Should you use the standard state contract? Your call. If you are only doing deals in your own state and you feel like that is a better option to use and your sellers are more familiar with that, hint, by the way, a lot of motivated sellers only see a contract once every 5 or 10 years when they sell or buy their own house. So they're probably not familiar with any contract, right? It's up to you. You can use your standard agreement or you can use this agreement. This is an investor-friendly contract that was built with Meg, obviously, for Mass, New Hampshire, Maine, and it also was run by, we've used this in 8 different virtual states that we have done business in. And it's make sure, right, you always run it by an attorney in your state if that's what you guys want to do. If you want to go outside the state, just run it by somebody. But this covers the basics. And when you're dealing with a motivated seller, we're going to go through quickly how you're going to fill this contract out. Now, remember, you're only filling this contract out once you've either over the phone or in person, right? Built the rapport, rated the motivation, assessed exactly what they want, right? Painting the picture perfect scenario as to where they're headed, gone through all of the other stuff that are problems aside from the price, right? Except for the price, Mr. Seller, we understand, we're gonna do our best on that, but we find there's other things that cause sellers to not, to not sign contracts or not be committed. Can we go through those things now, right? Like, do you have a place to go? Do you have family that has to work with you on? Do we have to worry about this clean out? Do you have the money for the move? Like all of those things, you have all that out of the way. And this is not that training today. So make sure you go see what we've done, a few trainings on sellers and scripting. And if you're part of, if you're part of the John Martinez or Steve Trang groups, you can get all that training there. But now you're sitting down with them and you're filling this contract out, right? Or you have this in your DocuSign and you're filling it out via DocuSign over a Zoom with them. So as we go, we're going to do this really fast, but you're going to see every contingency in here. We want to go through those with you guys so you know exactly what they are and how to work with them. All right. So I'm going to go through. If you guys have questions along the way, feel free to jump in and ask. Otherwise, I'm going to try to power through this as best we can. So obviously here, we're going to put the effective date of the contract, right? Parties and mailing address. I'm going to skip through this really, really fast. One of the things you have access to, right? Whether it's via PropStream, right? I think a lot of you have the relationship with, we have a PropStream affiliate code too, if you guys want a discount on that. I think it's propstream.reiaccelerated.com. You will have access to who is on the deed. If you are not using a software, when you're in person at the appointment or you're on the phone with them, you're going to want to pull this deed, right, using masslandrecords.com or netaronline.com, which is the national register of all the public databases. So you're going to want to find out who owns that property, because obviously you can only do this deal if one or all the people that are on that deed are signing the contract on that behalf. So here, you're going to want to make sure that whatever's on that deed that you have access to, or that's in PropStream, you have the actual parties here: husband, wife, kids, probates, whatever. How many deals go south because they get one seller to sign, and let's say it's in probate, but 3 other brothers and 2 other sisters actually also own the property, and it has to go to them now to make a decision? Lots, right? It just stalls the deal. So make sure you have the people who actually own it in here. Here's your LLC name, or your personal name, or your trust, or whatever it is you want to have. And you know what? It doesn't matter what you put here, because there's an assignment contract in here, okay? If you already have the LLC, put the LLC in here. If you don't, put the name of a trust in here. Is a trust not formed yet? Well, if you work with Meg's office, right, they can predate trust, because the only people who sign trust are notaries and you. That's it. So it doesn't matter what you put here, because what we can do is, you'll see later, there's a place to pick the entity prior to closing. Description. You don't have to fill in this stuff here. Book, page, and deed. You can find, that's all in the registry as well, but you don't have to fill this out when you're in front of the seller. All you have to do is fill out this address, right? Land improvements in the buildings, they're unknown and numbered as, right? 89 Coachman's Lane, Andover, Massachusetts, right? Whatever you want to do here and put that here. Sometimes if it's a multi or a single family, you can say single family on, and then the address. As we move down, I'm going to skip this, but these are important. The highlighted ones are the ones that are important that you want to make sure you know. If you're walking through the property and there's specific things right? And this is going to be more of a basic lesson. But if you guys have heard screwed versus nailed, that's kind of what personal property versus real property is delineated with. If something is screwed into a wall, it's considered real property and is assumed to convey with the closing. If it's nailed into a wall or not nailed at all, then it's personal property and is probably not included. Here, these two fields are where you can eliminate any of those confusions if you want, right? This is appliances are a big one here. Will the appliances convey or not? So if you're a rehabber, you're buying this as a wholesaler and you're going to someone's going to rehab the whole thing anyway, you probably don't care, right? Seller can take whatever they want. Doesn't matter. We're going to go down here, just the as a sale function. But if there's something in the property that you specifically want to continue to keep, right? You're going to want to do this, specifically including, right? I want to make sure this stays behind. Most of your sellers, you're not going to put anything here, right? Just going to leave it be. It's an as is sale. They get to take anything they want prior to closing. And then you, as the investor, wholesaler, novator, rehabber, right? You will deal with what is trashed, what is donated, what is sold after the closing. Here's one that we almost always checked off. And you can use each of these clauses too. We're going to get to the bigger clauses later. I want to make it clear that all of these clauses, you can communicate these to the seller. Always reframe it in the way that appeals to how you've already painted that picture perfect scenario, right? As we discussed, Mr. Jones, right? Like it's really important to you guys that you don't spend any more time, effort, or energy into the house already. You just want to make sure we have enough cash to get you to put some stuff in storage and to move you out. I promise you, our team's going to handle everything. You don't have to do the broom swept thing. You don't have to clean out your stuff. And here's the clause that shows that here, right? So we're going to check this box here. If this box is checked, seller may leave behind any property of any kind, as long as it is not hazardous in nature, and at closing, any items left the premises shall become sole property of buyer for no additional consideration. You'll note that the wording in this contract is different than the wording in the standard purchase and sale agreements, right? It's there on purpose. It's there to be a little bit more readable, and so people understand. It's also here to be checked off. What if here the seller's like, oh no, we have tires in the backyard or we have paint in the basement. What's wrong with that? You as the wholesaler, rehabber, problem solver, you know what, Mr. Seller? I don't think that's going to be a problem. In fact, why don't we write that in right here to make sure that you feel taken care of? Like we're going to make sure we'll take care of the paint, take care of the tires, take care of that. So you have the ability right here, right, to cross this off and initial it, or right below it to say, buyer to remove any paint cans and tires in the back. Like you have the ability to write that in. You're doing all this again as you're a problem solver for this seller. Everything here we're doing is problem solving. Here's where you're going to check off single family or multifamily or whatever it is, right, that you're buying. And here's where we're going to put our numbers in, right? So deposit this day. What do you guys use for your deposits with your sellers? Go ahead and unmute.
$1,000.
$1,000. Anybody else?
Usually at like
$1,000
$500.
works. What is it, Anthony?
I'm usually at like 500.
$500, $100, $10. Does it even matter? You need to put something there for consideration to make the contract valid, right? We've had sellers agree to $1. Why? Because they needed us to close in 7 days and a deposit wouldn't have even matter, right? Hey, listen, we're going to be closing this in 7 days. We're happy to give you a deposit, but it's so quick. Are you cool if we just make this valid for $1? The answer is yes, because they're going to get their money in 7 days anyway. So it's whatever you can work out with the seller, right? We have a document that we actually would provide to share with agents and sellers why our deposits were so low, including on $750 or $1 million transactions. Why are we still only putting down $1,000 or $5,000 escrows? Well, Mr. Seller or Mr. Agent, we totally understand that, but based on what we do for a living, we constantly have offers out with these sellers, and a lot of our sellers, we want to make sure we go above and beyond. We have 6-month escrow sometimes to make sure they have the time right? To either go through the property or to meet with their brothers and sisters to make sure it's going through probate. And at any point in time, you know, we might have $100,000 or $500,000 in escrows. And that's the reason why every single property, it's just a standard rule for us. We cannot exceed $5,000 on a deposit in this line. Right? If you're dealing direct to seller, usually isn't an issue. You put 1,000, you put 500, you put $10. Okay. So we only get a pushback on this if there's like an attorney or a broker involved, and we have an actual form that we then send to them to let them know this isn't a one, you know, we're not trying to get away with anything. This is just how we operate.
If you're dealing directly with a seller, who do you make the check out, the deposit check out to?
Awesome. Great question. We're going to get there right, I think, down here. So agreed purchase price for the premises. Here we go. This is to be paid by the time of delivery of the deed, right? So this is the balance of it. And this is, again, the total purchase price again. Here's an applicable, right? You can make this active or you don't have to. Buyer to take ownership of the property via installment sale from the seller. Principal amount of blank, rate of blank, balloon due in blank years with payments payable blank monthly or quarterly, right? Or not applicable, that there's no payments until maturity, and the amount of blank. It's that easy. People are like, oh, well, how do I, write that up? And don't I need an amortization table? And don't I need this? Yeah, it's going to be a part of that. But when you're just writing the offer, what does the seller care about if you're doing a seller finance deal? Typically, you've discussed, and they want a monthly, right, or quarterly, or they want payments like an annuity because they need to live, right? And they want to probably know that they'll have their money, all the money at some point in the future, 5 years, 10 years, 30 years. So again, what have you discussed with the seller? What fits their needs? What problems are you solving? And just throw it in here. Later, you can get to the amortization schedule. You can, come up, there'll be a note in a mortgage, like you'll get all that after the fact. But for right now, it's just putting terms on paper that the seller is going to agree to.
Hey, Nick, quick question.
Yeah.
You're not so concerned about the starting date at that point? The first payment
Nope.
date?
Nope,
Okay,
not
save
yet.
that for the note.
Yep. Note in the
Okay.
mortgage. I mean, the obviously going to be lending money, right? They're going to have to approve the note in the mortgage at some point, right?
Okay.
For right now, it's just terms. It's just the terms to get in there.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. Such deed is to be delivered on. If you have an actual date here that the seller needs to close by, right, to transfer title, you put it in here. Otherwise, lots and lots and lots of times, we would put in a window here, right? So such deed is to be delivered on, right? Within 6 months, but let's see, I'm trying to think. We used to have within, if it's a short sale, which we'll get to below, right, within 30 days of primary lien holder approval was always one of them. Such deed is to be delivered on within 14 days upon seller moving out, but no later than 6 months from effective date. Do you guys see how you can be creative in this spot? It's whatever meets the seller's needs, right? So if the seller wants a lot more probate, right, within 30 days after probate approval. So we had a lot of those because a lot of times the sellers just didn't, oh, well, there's a lot I have to do and there's this and that. Relax, it's totally okay. We're flexible. That's why we do what we do, right? So let's work through it. What are the biggest challenges or stressors for you on here? And why don't we just say we'll close within 30 days after that's all taken care of? And in the meantime, what can we do to help push that through for you? Right? So then we come down to conditions of premises, right? And again, most of that will be right here. Premises is being delivered as is. Check this box. If box is checked, the seller shall deliver the premises in as is condition. Buyer shall accept the premises in non-broom swept condition with any items left behind that seller does not want to remove. This is actually twice in the contract so far, right? It's to allow the seller to feel that they're going to be okay, taken care of, right? They don't have to worry about all that stuff. One of the biggest reasons they're coming to you as an investor, wholesale, rehabber, whatever, is so that they don't have to clean out the property. They don't have to deal with the open houses. They don't have to deal with the showings and running around and cleaning up the shit. So we put that in here twice to let them know and remind them, what a good step it is to work with the investment company. Here's one that I want to go over real quick. This was, the attorney language, but I want you guys to know that this is a thing. If this P&S gets signed and then you send it to your escrow agent, right? Whether it's a title company or in mass, it's an attorney, right? Typically, if there's a title issue, right? the seller, the closing date is coming, and then at that point, the seller has not cured title. Most of our sellers are motivated sellers. They're probably not going to have an attorney, or if they do, they might go back to the attorney. If there's a title issue, right, your title company is going to tell you, or your attorney is going to tell you. And then you go to the seller and say, hey, we found an issue. Do you remember who it was that closed on the property when you bought it? Let's see if we can loop them in and see if they can take care of this. But if the seller doesn't have an attorney or doesn't remember or whatever, right? At that point, the seller could essentially walk away after 30 days after the closing date saying, well, we couldn't fix the title issue. What we did here is, that's the standard language. What we did here is if after the 30 days has expired and or the cost of cure is above the $1,500, seller will not agree to extend further under this paragraph, and seller will not agree. This happens if in the meantime, they got a better offer from another investor. Okay, so we make sure we put this clause in there. Seller will not agree to extend further under this paragraph. The buyer shall have unilateral right to further extend under this paragraph or to spend the money above $1,500 for an additional X amount of days. So at this point, you can put 30, another 30 days, another 60 days, it doesn't matter. What this does though, is it shifts from the seller to just immediately canceling the contract and going with the other investor's offer that might be higher. It puts the deal back in the buyer's hands, the decision, right? Well, do we want to deal with the title issue? We can pay, we're going to pay for it anyway, $3,000, $4,000 bucks, whatever it is. You still have that right. And you also have the right here. Well, we never even changed this. So we don't go over these minute details with the seller, you guys. We don't, this is for you guys. We don't go through any of this with the seller. Here, buyer's relation to accept title. This is what we mostly do anyway. If there's a title issue, right? We're talking to our title agent, we're talking to our attorney. What's it going to cost and roughly how bad is the title issue, right? Because we're going to probably handle that anyway. If it's under $5,000 or even $10,000. The only time we will deal with the title issue before closing is if it's going to result in us being unable to resell the property in the next 3 to 5 years, or if it's a flip, being unable to resell the property in 6 months or a year, right? I'm going over this with you guys. I don't want anyone to get overwhelmed. We don't go through any of this with our seller, right? Really, it's just the highlighted portions and the clauses that we'll get into in a minute that we go over with our motivated sellers, because that's all they care about. I'm going to skip all this part for now. Use of purchase money. We're going to skip this one. Here's one that the seller should be, hey, by the way, while we're still in escrow, you know, do you guys have the means to keep your insurance and your taxes paid? It's a conversation with your seller, right? No, I'm out. I don't want to deal with this anymore. Okay, well, we can probably work something out, right? But just to let you know that it usually comes out of your proceeds at the closing, but we can make it so you don't have to have that outlay these next 1, 2, or 3 months. Is that okay? Right? In which case, you know, you can cross this off and you can cross these off and make buyer. You can make your own notes on this to appeal to what the seller needs. You're in that emotional conversation with them right here, right? So make this contract work for them so they feel taken care of. That's the whole point of this whole thing. This is more of a show and a ceremony than it is a legal contract. It's both. But you can use this as the opportunity so that you are the person serving this seller. You're solving the problem. That's the whole point. Another buyer from a realtor will not be doing this, right? Going down here, broker's fee commission. There are no brokers due any fees under this transaction, right? That's one of the benefits of working with us is you don't have to pay commission. But I do have to let you know, Mr. Seller, which you probably already know, right? I am a licensed agent in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, licensed broker. But as you know, I'm not acting as an agent here today, right? I'm acting as the buyer here of this transaction. But I have to tell you, the state of Massachusetts makes me tell you that. So we have that in the contract. Here we go, Jack. All deposits made hereunder shall be held in escrow. So it's whatever you want to put down in here. What escrow agent do you want to use, right? You know, this is obviously our escrow agent, right? It doesn't have to be. You can put whatever you guys want in here. Just know, and this is important, you guys all should know this, and I know Alan will probably jump in on this too. So here's a common misconception from investors. Well, and it's more the time when you're on the selling side, like A to B to C, like you sold to C and C defaults, right? Like you're making that spread in the middle and C defaults, but they put that $5,000 deposit. You're like, well, they defaulted, but I'm taking their $5,000, right? And you go to the escrow agent, wherever they have the money, and say, well, I want the 5,000, they defaulted, so it's mine. The answer is yes, it is. But will the escrow agent release it without a signed release? Right? We were a listing brokerage company, AE Premier Properties. We were an escrow agent, right? So with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, we took the oath. We're an escrow agent. If a seller default or a buyer defaulted, seller's like, that's my money. We're like, maybe it is, but we can't release it without a signed release from both parties. Well, they're not going to sign it. You know, they walked away. Fuck them. Then you're going to have to sue. What sucks about escrow agents, right? Like, it's not just your money. You do have to sue to get that money. And then maybe there's a settlement, maybe there's a release, but an escrow agent won't just release it unless there's a signed release. That was a side note. I want you guys all to feel that, though, so that you know it's not just like mine. It's not yours to do what you want to do.
So Nick,
yeah.
What if the sellers has an agent and they're the ones holding it? I know, like, theoretically that should be still the same situation, but there's probably going to be less, you know, unless I'm demanding it or my attorney is demanding it. You know, it just seems more likely that their agent would just give it to their client, right?
Certainly not. If they do, they're against it. They're not. That's not an escrow agent. Then they can be sued. If they release that money without a signed release by both buyer and seller, they are not acting as an escrow agent, and they will be sued for that amount by the person who wants it.
All right. I mean, maybe we'll talk about $8,000 EMG that got lost last year. Because I didn't sign any release.
Yep. If that's the case, then definitely contact an attorney, Anthony. I know you've got a couple, but you absolutely have the right. Now, that attorney who you hire will say, you know, what your likelihood is. Like, yes, you are entitled, or they obviously they shouldn't have done that. So either way, right? But that is a whole other case. But they cannot release that without a court order or without a buyer and seller release.
Wow. All right. Thanks.
Yes. All right, let's go down here. I'm going to skip through this. Again, I don't do any of this. Here's ones that's just important, right? Again, this goes along with whatever was on the deed that you had in the seller name up top. Is there a husband and wife? The seller's spouse hereby agrees to join in said deed and release and convey all their other rights. If they don't release their rights, then whoever signs this contract really doesn't have the right to sign the contract. But it's a good thing to just, hey, you know, I know we haven't seen your wife or your husband here in the last 3 months we've been talking. Are they still around? Do they have rights to the property, right? Like, you should already know that by this point. Keep going down. Here's interesting, right? Mortgage contingency clause. Most of the time, you can change this. You can add a contingency in here, but most of the time, right, we're not coming in here with a mortgage contingency clause. Now, this is a difference. We are not contingent upon financing. Does that mean that we can't use financing to take down this deal? You can use financing. This just says that your deposit, right, is not at risk if you can't get financing. And if you're wholesaling it, right, they don't care. The seller likes this because they know they don't have to deal with financing extensions and bullshit with lending banks and that sort of thing. But you can absolutely still use financing if you will be the intended closer, if you're going to be the actual one to close this deal. And now here we go with additional provisions. This is where we get into important stuff here. I want to go over this with you guys. If this offer is accepted by you, then our obligation to buy the premises is subject to and conditioned upon. You have the right to write things in. You have the right to cross things out. You have the right to modify any language in this contract to work with the seller's picture perfect scenario, everything you've already addressed with them. This is making them feel warm and fuzzies, right? It's also protecting certain things with you in the contract. The right, the supervision is necessary to access the premises for inspections and measurements for informational purposes only. If the seller then says, well, I really would like to know when people are coming, and this is the part where you can ask them if they're already gone, like, hey, are you okay if we put a lockbox on this property and we have our contractors coming in and out? This is also the place where, right, if you're going to be wholesaling it, this will give you access to have an investor open house or an investor showings. Right? Now, the seller, don't worry, anybody who comes to the property, I will always be there. I will always be making sure that things are safe. And, we're obviously responsible for anything that gets stolen or, is left behind or whatever, right? Like, you can have that conversation with the seller, but this is a big one to make sure that you have access to the property. That said, you should have already taken at least 2 photos of every single room and every single problem in that property, so that some investors, if you're wholesaling, will buy it sight unseen with your camera pictures only. Right? But this allows you to have those investor group showings, investor open houses, and to bring your own contractor crews through for estimates if you want to do any of that. Premises to be delivered in a broom clean condition, or buyer initial here, as is as seen with no clean out necessary. Once again, 3rd time it's in the contract, making sure they feel the warm and fuzzies. Satisfactory walkthrough by buyer representatives to confirm construction figures within 7 days of the acceptance of this offer. What does that mean, you guys and gals?
Gives you a lot of outs.
There it is. This is back in the day, right? This was contingent on partners' approval within 7 days, right? Which is that's a bullshit one. This one's real. This one is we would contract over the phone or in Zoom with some sellers, but we hadn't actually physically seen the property. We just got pictures, right? So we want to make sure and verify that those are pictures we're taking in the last month and not the last 10 years, and that it's actually a burnout that we didn't even know. So this is very important. And it's absolutely necessary no matter what. If you're there with the homeowner and you've already seen the property, you've already taken the pictures, we still leave this in there because it allows us, right, to bring people through or contractors through or partners through or even buyers through, right? So they can verify construction. And if they come in higher than you and they tell you, hey, I can't pay what you're looking for on this wholesale fee, you can go back to the seller and renegotiate. Very, very important clause. We use that in every single deal. D, satisfactory walkthrough by a buyer or representatives 24 hours prior to closing, making sure that, right, the house didn't burn down by the closing. We didn't always do this. It's a good practice to always do it. We didn't always go to the property prior to the closing, but it's here. So it's there for you to need it. Here's where we get specific. If it's a condo, contingent upon buyer receipt and approval of condo docs and budget. I know we have some condo experts in the group right now, HOA and condo budget experts with dealing with HOAs, especially if it's a smaller association, 2, 3, 4, 6 units. So, Jack, you still have hair, it's okay. But let's make sure that, if it is a condo, you want to make sure that you review or you have your attorney review the bylaws, review the master deed, making sure you have no issues when you go to resell, refinance, right? Because this becomes issues when you go to resell it or refinance. So let's find out about all the issues now. And it also shows who gives it the 6D if you're in Massachusetts, right? Who's responsible for the exteriors? Do you have to make friends with the other tenants? Like, what do you have to do? So condo is important that you get a chance to review that before you make a full determination and move forward with this closing. If septic, we have this label, this is Massachusetts language, because Massachusetts has something called a Title V inspection. I want you guys to see, though, Massachusetts being one of the harder septic states, you can change this to, you can just eliminate the words Title V, contingent upon septic system passing an inspection, right? If Title V does not pass, buyer assumes all costs and responsibilities for obtaining an approved septic design. This is something you need to be aware of, right? So you would be putting out an additional $3,000 to $5,000 to bring the septic system back into compliance with local TED ordinances prior to closing. Typical septic systems may cost from $20,000, in some cases above $50,000 for installation. Do you see how we're telling a story to the seller here? We're putting it right in the contract so they're understanding why we're going to be coming up with what we're about to say to them, okay? Seller agrees to credit this amount back to buyer in the form of a credit at closing or in lowering the purchase price. Seller understands and acknowledges that buyer may have to expend costs toward said compliance before buyer takes title, like a Title V inspection, like a septic design. And therefore, seller agrees to reimburse buyer for all reasonable expenses incurred by buyer in association with said compliance if seller shall fail to perform on this agreement for any reason, including but not limited to title defect, marketability of title, or insurability of title. You see how we're building up why we're telling the seller, hey, listen, if, and this is a very small if, like this property comes back and something happened when you bought the property, before you bought the property, where you can't even sell this right now, by the way, we're probably still going to be hanging in there and we have context. We're going to help you out with all that. But if that does happen in that case, and we put out like $3,000 to $5,000, we have to have this in there just in case, right? But I promise you, working with us, as long as you're still in for the long haul like we are, we're going to see this through, and we're going to fix title issues. We're going to make sure the septic gets to where it needs to get to. But just in case, right, something does happen and we can't move forward, any buyer is going to have to put out that cost. So we're going to make sure that that's covered in this deal. All right, if multifamily and tenanted, contingent upon satisfactory review within 7 days of receipt and conveyance of all leases, rental applications, security deposits or verification of security deposits, and yes, tenant estoppel letters, tenant contact information and keys. Very, very, very important, right? If it's a multifamily, you're going to need access to all this information. Why do we have tenant estoppel letters? I'll tell you why. Because if you're buying a 6-unit or an 8-unit or a 12-unit building, and the seller tells you that they didn't take any security deposits, then you close on the building and every single tenant says, yeah, we gave the seller a $2,000 security deposit. We signed up. Guess who's now out $24,000 because you can't prove that they didn't have security deposits. You guys with me? So that's a big deal. You're going to want to have access to those leases because you're going to want to know what it actually looks like. And if you're wholesaling this, your buyer is going to need access to the leases. They're going to need access to the rent rolls. They're going to need access to the applications so that they know how to get in touch with these people. A lot of people can buy sight unseen, and you can do that, but the seller has this information. So just let them know this is where you bring it up. By the way, while I'm here, you already have all this information for me that we can just put into it to the file. That way it's taken care of.
What if the seller drags their feet in getting that information to you?
They can. So see how it says contingent upon satisfactory review within 7 days, right? So this is within 7 days of receipt. Very important 2 words here. So if they don't get that to you until 3 days prior to closing, you still have 7 days from then to verify before you move forward with the closing.
Got it.
You get that? A lot of you guys in the commercial realm, right? We have that in our letters of intent as well. Of receipt is a very important 2 words. If short sale, all terms and conditions subject to third-party approval by seller's lender. If this is a short sale, or if you're sniffing around and you feel and you think that this seller, whatever number that you're putting on this offer agreement, might be less than what they owe, you're going to want to get an authorization to release that information. You're going to want to call that lender with them on the phone that day and find out, right, what their payoff is and what they owe on that mortgage to make sure that the offer minus, some taxes and closing costs, recording fees, can exceed what they owe on that property. If not, you're going to want to get an authorization to release information. That's in the short sale package that's available to most of you guys. And if you need one of those, right, Christina in this group or Marianne can get you one of those. Marianne from Short Sale Mitigation gets you one of those. But it's important to note that you're going to want to know what that payoff is. And if possible, you're there in front of the seller right then, get the lender on the phone while you're going through this, right? If not, you want to get that authorization, get their social security on it. It has their loan number and loan information on it, and it has their signature, which you're going to need to get that information after the fact. All terms and conditions subject to third-party approval by seller's lender. Seller has the right to review and accept the terms of the lender approval prior to closing. That's important. By the way, Mrs. Seller, if everything happens, right, this is a short sale. So we go through all the process, and let's say it takes 2 to 3 to 4 months to get everything through. I promise you that before we move forward with the closing, you have the right to look at all the approval information. We can have your attorney do it, or we can do it together to make sure it's acceptable to you before we go forward to closing. You will have final say. Makes them feel in control, the warm and fuzzies, right? Subject to the property being free of all tenants and occupants. Important, they do have to move out, but by closing or at closing. Seller and buyer to cooperate with and timely provide all required documentation to a third party short sale debt settlement firm. If you guys are using a third party debt settlement firm, I highly recommend it. Who will assist in resolving debts with all lien holders. Buyer to pay all fees for these services if applicable. Again, if this isn't applicable, you're going to skip right by it. If it is, you guys both initial. And we have this one here for a potential teardown. Buyer will spend all the effort and time going through the permitting process. Seller to provide any prior architectural, planning, or engineering documentation to buyer. Seller to cooperate, attend hearings, and sign off on paperwork as required, and they shall assign any open permits or approvals prior at closing. Why do we do this? I'll tell you right now. Local zoning boards, planning boards, building departments. A lot of times they will have a big issue with Anthony Valera, big developer LLC, coming in, pulling permits to make money on a deal versus Mr. and Mrs. Jones that have lived there for 25 years and their name is on the planning board and the zoning. Even if it's Anthony Valera's company at the boards, right? We want to make sure that this property has the value that we think it does before we proceed to close it. If it's a tear down, you're going to want to know that you can actually permit what you want to build there before you give the seller the money that you promised that seller, right? So what we do here is we'll even put a lot of times we'll put potential the permit contingency, right? Contingent on buyer obtaining permits for a blank building, 3-bedroom single family house, 3-bedroom 2,200 square foot house, 6-family, minimum 6,000 square foot house on this R6 lot. Whatever it is that you want to put in there to make sure it meets the value that you're giving to that seller. So that's a permit contingency. And it's really, really important to make sure it's worth that. And you can still sell this contract to another developer, but the developer is going to want to make sure that there's a permit contingency in this offer. Okay. Moving on. So here's a couple other ones. Check one, right? If you're in Massachusetts, again, so we have a fire code and we have a required smoke certificate inspection prior to closing. Check one, buyer shall be solely responsible for obtaining a passing smoke certificate or carbon certificate for closing, or waives any requirement thereof. By checking that box, does that give the seller some warm and fuzzies? Because if they dealt with a realtor and a retail buyer, oh, we're gonna have to upgrade the smokes and the electrical. That's gonna cost $500 to $700 to hardwire all the shit in this house. Here's one more thing. I'm so thankful I'm dealing with an investor and not a retail buyer, right? Another one, seller shall obtain and provide a passing smoke by closing. Sometimes if it's a relatively decent property and the seller does have some reserves, if you get them to say yes to this, you don't have to deal with that when you go around and rehab the building, or your buyer doesn't have to deal with that. Title V's, again, you can delete if you're not in Massachusetts, right? Property is serviced by a private septic and seller shall produce a passing Title V certificate at closing. If you want, you can just change this to septic inspection, which we already had up here, right? You can rename Title V to just septic inspection. Property is not serviced by private septic, or buyer shall be solely responsible if it is to obtain a passing Title V or waive this requirement, right? So you're either going to hit this, if you check the septic contingency up here, you're going to make sure you check the one down here. So if it's only if you want to have all responsibility and all the costs and everything on you, right, is when you're going to check this box right here. Which I wouldn't, again, in Massachusetts, they can go over $50,000. I've seen them go to $80,000, right, in Harvard, Massachusetts. So you want to be careful with that.
Can I ask a question on that?
Yeah.
So in that previous paragraph about the Title V, where it stated that the buyer is going to be fixing it before closing, and
yep.
obviously all costs reimbursed. Why do you do that before closing? Because it has to be done before closing?
This is because it's contingent on my offer price to them, Janine, right? So if this is the case, if I'm talking to the seller and they need a certain number, right? Well, I'll tell you what, Mrs. Seller, I don't know if we can get to that number, but especially because your septic is questionable, and here in Massachusetts, they range from $20,000 to $100,000 for new septic tanks. But I'll tell you what we'll do. To get to this number that you want, right? If you let us do some preliminary work during the escrow period, we're going to see what it actually entails to get that septic in there. If we have to do a whole new septic tank, we'll know that by the closing. And all I ask is that we, reduce the purchase price by that amount of money for whatever amount that designer is going to come in at. They're going to tell us what they need, Mr. Seller. It's up to these people. They're going to do this for a retail buyer anyway. So we'll go through the time, effort, and energy, right? And we'll put up the initial $3,000 to $5,000 to get that septic design done. Right. So we know, and then what would need to be done to get this property to comply.
Got it. So you're not doing the actual septic, you're just getting the design done and the approvals done.
Exactly. We can get
Got
we can get the bids. You need the design to get the bids to do the
Got it.
septic install.
Yep, that
or the
makes
septic
sense.
repairs.
Now for the tear down paragraph, how come we don't ask for their reimbursement for that process like you do in the septic process?
You certainly can. You certainly can. But is it the seller that wants to permit this property, or does the buyer or you want to permit the property?
Got it.
But you can absolutely ask, you know, Mr. Seller, I know you've been wanting to permit this property for years and years and years, and you just haven't gotten around to it, or you didn't have the money, or you didn't have this and that. Why don't we go through the time, effort, energy? We can put up the $5,000 to $10,000 in engineering and legal and design fees, right? But if we can't get it permitted, right? If we do go through all that situation, we can't get it permitted. Are you okay if reimbursing us for the money that we put out on it? It's tough. It's a tough ask.
What if you do get it permitted and then for whatever reason it doesn't go through? Now they've got all this extra value on their land because now they can go sell it with a permit.
Yes, but usually that's why this offer, the offer price you've already built in with the seller is contingent upon that already, right? But yeah, I like what you're saying. So if you have a permit contingency and you go through and get all the permits on this property, and then the seller defaults, yes, you absolutely have a right to that dollar amount. That's a really good one to do. I'm gonna find it. I'm gonna maybe update that with a clause, Janine. I like that. But that's when you absolutely have the right to ask for the reimbursement, or you won't get it because the seller at that point has pulled the deal from you, right? You're gonna have to sue them anyway for your deposit and sue for specific performance. So they're also not gonna give you the $4,000 to $5,000 that you just went through in the zoning and engineering. You have to sue for that as well. But it's helpful to have that as a clause for sure. That's a good ask. It's a good ask.
Isn't it required to have Title V in order to close? Like you can't close without a
Massachusetts,
Title V.
Massachusetts, that's correct, unless it's a commercial purchaser, Christina. So if it's a rehabber, right, that's an LLC or a trust, you can waive the requirement. The problem is, right, if they resell it, they're going to have to get a Title V, right? If they sell it to a residential buyer. But as an investor or a commercial property, yes, you sometimes are able to waive that requirement. It also depends on your escrow agent, right? Like Meg's office, you can waive it.
Oh, okay.
But you eventually will need a Title V, right, to refinance, sell, or if there's a failed Title V, you have X amount of time to, 3 years, I think? You have 3 years to remedy a failed Title V, or else fines, or else I think the government has actually taken homes because of it, which is pretty dumb.
Wow.
But yeah, it's not. There's a lot of states this isn't required, right? But in this which case, you want to just make sure that the septic passes an inspection of some sort, especially if you're not local to the area.
So if you pay for the septic inspection and then they don't close, you have to go after them for the reimbursement for the inspection, or how does that work?
So typically, the septic inspection is like between $350 and $500. We don't, every single buyer, typically that's their cost anyway. It's kind of like a buyer paying for a regular home inspection.
Yeah.
So that's not a reimbursable for the seller. The reimbursable would be if we go through $3,000 to $5,000 in design fees. By the way, design fees might only be $1,500, depending on the lot, depending on the tank, depending on the system. But we always tell, Mr. Seller, we'll go through the $3,000 to $5,000 on getting all the design taken care of. Then we can understand where we're at with bids. We'll know how much the septic costs to repair or replace, depending on what the engineer's report comes back. And we're good with all those costs as long as you are. The only challenge is if you fail, if we can't close for a reason that's on your side, what would that be? Well, we don't know that, Mr. Seller. Typically, 99% of all of our process, our deals go smoothly anyway. But if it doesn't, that $3,000 to $5,000 would be reimbursable by you because of all the time, effort, energy, and costs we put out finding the solution to that problem. But don't worry, you don't have to pay that because we're just going to close on it when you're ready, right? When we go through all your stuff, and it's not an issue. that make sense?
Mhm. Thank you.
Yeah. These are good questions, you guys. All right. Extras for seller. I know we're over time here, guys, but this is, again, for posterity's sake too. We're recording this and we'll be posting this in the accelerated library as well. Closing costs. So these are extras. These are the warm and fuzzies. What else did you talk about with that seller to paint that picture perfect scenario? What else are there stressor points that you can help alleviate here in the creative section? It's called the creative section, right? Even just wording things that have no bearing on the sale itself, but the seller wants it because, or you think the seller could want it because it'll make them feel good. This is where you can put all that stuff in, right? Buyer agrees to not flush Sammy the fish down the toilet upon leaving this building. You laugh. That was an issue in with one of my sellers. What are you gonna do with the fish? Do you want to take the fish with you? No, I don't. Okay. I guess we can release Sammy to the pond and we'll find a pond for Sammy, right? Like whatever that works. These are things it's whatever you want for the seller to make them feel good in this section, right? And we're ending the contract with these things. So here's a couple examples. Closing costs. Seller agrees to pay all customary closing costs on this sale with the only exclusions. Why do we have this in there? Because sellers finally get to the closing and they're getting, $50,000 or $80,000 in proceeds, but they haven't paid taxes in 5 or 6 years. And therefore they find their $80,000 turned into $45,000 or $50,000. Like, where did all that money go? Or if it's like our Bill Ricca deal, they were going to get just a $15,000 spread, but they owe $12,000 in taxes. So they get their check at $3,000. They're like, what's this? Right? So we do tell that we pay all closing costs to the seller, as we discussed, right? That's part of the benefit of working with an investment company. Is we'll pay everything on it. The only things we don't cover, right? If there's any sort of back water, back sewer, back taxes, but you don't even have to pay those because you're going to take them out at the closing table, right? Our escrow company will handle getting all the payoffs. You don't have to worry about any of that stuff. So that's a good thing, right? Warm and fuzzy. Here's some
Shouldn't
others.
that say buyer agrees to pay?
Oh, so Janine, it's intentionally written as seller so that you cross it off and write buyer to give them warm and fuzzies. If that makes
Oh,
sense.
okay.
So they see that the seller typically pays, right? And then you say, based on our conversation earlier, great
Got it.
catch. Sorry, I didn't mention that. Based on our conversation earlier, we're going to handle all that for you, right?
Got it.
You're special, Mr. Seller. So you cross off seller and you write buyer above it. Great question.
Okay.
Gives them some warm and fuzzies, right? Okay, closing date guarantee. Seller, this is just stuff if the seller is all freaked out. Maybe they had a buyer that couldn't perform earlier, right? What do? Oh my gosh. Seller to meet the closing date of blank. Should the seller, due to seller's error, not be able to close by the closing date, the seller agrees to pay an additional $1,000 to seller for each 7-week extension needed. Right? This is a lot of times if the seller has been burned by another investor before that did not perform. Well, Mr. Seller, I totally get you. That sucks. I know a lot of people who deal with that. A lot of people don't have the means to close. A lot of people don't have the right partners and things in place. I'll tell you what we'll do. Just to put our money where our mouth is, how about we're going to close on this date. Otherwise, we're going to start paying you more money, right? Non-refundable money that goes to you as a penalty until we do. No other investor
This
offered you
says
that, did they?
seller again.
Yeah, this says seller to seller. I think there's definitely a correction that would need to be made there.
Thank you. Should buyer. I don't know what happened here. That's weird. Not to be able to close by the closing date. Seller agrees to pay. Oh wow, it's all additional 1,000.
I mean, it's
seller. There it is.
It's not bad
Thanks.
to have, but we wouldn't want to charge them $1,000 a week.
But you know what? This has been out there for about a year. You guys are the first to catch that. I appreciate you very much. Wonder how our team dealt with that.
I wonder how many sellers have been paying themselves $1,000 for 7-week extensions.
That's pretty funny. Dickens, we never had to use this, did we, when you were in the team?
I haven't used this one yet.
All right. We always close on our dates. It was never an issue. We always met our closing dates. All right. Moving expenses. Here's another one. Buyer agrees to pay an additional blank as a hard deposit within 8 days from the agreement and immediately payable to seller for moving expenses, provided seller signs and places deed in escrow with escrow agent. So based on what we discussed, Mr. Seller, right, we understand like one of the biggest pains, right, is actually having the money to put some stuff in storage and hire the moving company and this and that. We have a program where we can actually pay up to $3,000 or $5,000 for that service, but it does require some extra paperwork with the attorney, right? So you might have to sign a couple of documents up ahead and up front just in case. But if that's something that's important to you, we can make that happen. Is that important to you? Right? That's a big one. Now, why do we have this? There's a lot of investors that are like, oh, don't worry about the attorney. Here's $5,000 just to sign my offer, right? And it gives the seller $5,000 check or $5,000 in cash. The seller then takes that and then disappears. Poof. Right? Gone.
That's all right. We can send Christina after them.
Yeah, I can go get them for you.
That's awesome. Oh gosh, a lot of them disappear on this. So what we do is we just make sure that they have some things in escrow before we release, $5,000, $2,000, whatever they feel is important. You have them come up with a number. What do you think is a good, a number that you might need for some moving expenses or, some packers and movers? Well, I don't know. All right. Well, a lot of our sellers do 3,000. Does that help? No, I want more. Okay, we can go up to 5,000 on this. Right? So that's how you word all those stuff. Here's another one. Relocation assistance. Seller agrees to assign team members and assist seller. Why does it say that again? Buyer agrees to assign team members and assist seller, although not be primarily responsible for finding suitable housing through connecting them with team members, showing properties, and assisting with negotiating the lease or the contract. Buyer and seller agree to a closing date within 30 days after seller finds suitable housing, and no later than, because you do need a no later than date. Let's say 6 months from there is customary. You see what we did here? A lot of the pain points for our sellers is that they didn't have a place to go. So here we can solve that problem, or we try to solve that problem on their behalf. And by solving that problem, they're going to sign our offer over all the other investor cash offers that go in there and be like, here's the money, take it or leave it, and fuck where you want to live. Right? That's important. And I want to, and you can add anything else in here, guys. I want to make that very clear. So these extras for seller, these are your warm and fuzzies. When you find others, add it to your contract, right? Add options. So these are already in here. These are examples only. So these are for you to kind of really think about, learn from, and either copy and paste if you're there, or if you're live in front of the seller, you word it as best you can. Okay. If you want to have this in your standard, this can be your standard. Make a copy of this. This is for you guys, and do whatever you want to do with it. The last one, and it's very, very, very important. Intent for profit. Buyer and seller understand that buyer intends, this is for wholesalers. Buyer intends to resell these premises or this contract for a profit and shall have the exclusive right to market this contract or premises on the MLS or other public outlets for immediate resale. Buyer shall, without seller approval, have the unilateral right to assign this contract. If you are a wholesaler or not a wholesaler, you still want to have this profit intent clause in there. Buyer and seller understands that buyer intends to resell this premises at some point and intends to make a profit on the sale. Right? Why? Oh my God, I don't want to have that in there. What is the seller going to say? That's why you're there. Mrs. Seller, as you know, this is how we feed our families. Right? Based on everything we talked about, our job is to solve as many problems as we can and make this as easy a transition for you as humanly possible. With all of these solutions that we've come up with, and the hard deposit, the relocation assistance, and buying it as is, and making sure it meets everything that can relieve the stress off of you. And because of that, obviously, we're an investment company, right? So we have to make money. That's a conversation you have before you even get to the offer, right? So there it is. I want to make sure that everyone knows that's not a hard conversation to have. And I have never, ever had a seller push back because of a profit intent clause. Not once. Right? Why are you there otherwise? So that's it. We sign here. Seller and buyer will sign it. Obviously, you can delete all this stuff once you guys have access to this. It's going to be in your REI Accelerated Course Library. It's also going to be in the REI Ignition Facebook group. So you'll have access to that. Otherwise, if you've received this contract by coming through one of our Facebook advertisements, feel free to reach out to the REI Unleashed Facebook group, and you can get connected with these powerful men and women of REI Ignition, REI Accelerated. We'd love to have you guys as part of our tribe, part of our groups. Does anyone have any questions before we sign off for the day? We went over time, but I hope this was helpful to some of you guys.
Yeah, I
So
have
there
a quick
was.
one.
Oh, sorry.
So you've said Meg's already looked through this, so we could use this pretty much as is without having her look at it again.
That is exactly why we have it available.
Okay.
Yep. It's for Mass, New Hampshire, Maine. We've also had it approved in South Carolina, North Carolina, Florida, Ohio, Pennsylvania. It has been approved in, these are the ones, just the ones we've used it in. We have some other students that are using this in multiple different states. Right now, if you're using it in any state that we haven't mentioned right now, you want to have an attorney look at, right? And they're going to say, no, use my contract. Well, you can use their contract, or just take the differences in their contract and maybe add it to this one. We're trying to make something that's national, right? And there's a national virtual investors, they're using one contract that they probably pulled from somebody in Texas or Florida. The problem with those contracts is they're so loosey-goosey, they can't work in high regulation states like Massachusetts, like Pennsylvania, right? Like these, a contract that's drafted in a very difficult attorney state to work in. Massachusetts is one of the hardest states to do business in. So when you have one like that, at that point, you start with that and you move forward. And we try to make it seller friendly so that they understand what these clauses mean as we go through. It's not just legalese. A lot of it is, but we skip all that, right? We go through mostly the yellows and the greens here. Go ahead, Janine.
All right, I have two questions. Is there any agency disclosure that is like a boilerplate disclosure that could be utilized to add to this? Just stating that like seller acknowledges that buyer is a licensed agent and is not representing the seller.
Number 17.
Or did I miss that?
Buyer is a licensed broker and potentially has a financial interest in the premises. There are no brokers to any fees in this transaction. Yep.
Sorry, my internet was touch and go earlier. I missed that part. Thank you.
You're all good. I'm glad we had
Second
an answer for you.
question. Once we have this all filled out, should we still send it to our attorney before sending it to the seller?
Why?
No.
I understand why. It's up to you.
I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know.
It's totally up to you. So as you scale in your investment journey, these offers, you're going to be creating more and more and more and more, to the point where you might be putting out 5 offers a day. You're not going to be pushing these to your attorney first. These are for you. These are for you to go over with your seller, and you will get more and more and more comfortable with them. And your sellers, when they ask some questions, worst case scenario is you don't know. You say, you know what, that's a good question. Let me get with, you know, our title company or our attorney on that, and we'll get an answer for you.
Awesome.
You know, but yeah, you're going to be putting out 5, 6, 7 offers a day if you get to a place where you're scaled up to that level.
Cool.
Good stuff. Christina.
So I added something in the chat because I remember how I went and recorded the purchase and sale when I thought that my lady that we were wholesaling with was trying to sell to somebody else. And technically you're not supposed to go and record the purchase and sale. But if you have this clause written into this offer, then you can, because they're giving you permission to. And I will
like that.
absolutely be doing that on every single one that I do now.
So I will, let me look at this and I'll do my best to put it in here. I will say to you guys this, a lot of gurus will teach you to go and record the purchase and sale agreement against the contract. In Mass in New Hampshire, instead of recording the P&S, you record something called a notice of contract. So you're not recording the actual contract because that discloses certain details that you don't want disclosed to the world and the seller doesn't want either. Right? So a notice of contract, though, if we only ever record that, if we feel that the seller's being really, really fishy, and if we continue to want to proceed, like there's a big enough spread in the transaction that we still want to fight this, if it's going to be a fight. At that point, we will record the notice of contract at the registry of deeds. right? And you still will need a title company or an attorney to record that on your behalf. We can try, like Massachusetts is a hit or miss for you to go in there and do it yourself, but a lot of times they're e-recording. You're gonna wanna have someone e-record it. But that's a good one, Christine. Let me put that and see what that looks like if we add it in. I'll put it before the profit and see what it looks like. Will the seller, is it harsh enough where the seller's gonna push back?
No, I don't think so. I think it just is kind of this. So this was given to me by Paul English. He's an attorney
I know
here
Paul
in
well.
New Hampshire. Oh yeah, so
Yeah.
he's the one that offered that to me. I don't think there would be pushback. It's how I would present it is just say that to protect everybody's interest in this, we do record the purchase and sale or notice of contract so that everyone's on the same page type of thing.
Oh God. Oh God. See, here's why I'm not an integrator.
Right?
This business shall be available to the buyer in event of seller breach. Further, if seller breaches and or refuses to sell the property in the terms herein without due cause, seller specifically grants the right and power to the buyer to record a copy of this agreement. Burden should be properly situated. I like it. I like it. I'll put it in the I'll put it in this one. Cool, good stuff. All right, other questions?
Yeah, Nick, I had a couple of comments.
Sure. Yes, Mr. Attorney, you probably have more experience than I do on this one, but go for it.
I'm going to limit it to 3 though, just because I know you're towards the end. But I can see Megan's fingerprints all over this. This is a nice contract. The thing about assigning, I just wanted to point out for anybody that at least in Massachusetts, even though it's great and it's always good to put it up front, and I think you have it in at least 2 different places that this contract is unilaterally assignable. By law, contracts in Massachusetts, if they don't specifically say they're non-assignable, they are assignable. So just so anybody knows that if they forgot to put it in or it wasn't discussed, it's still assignable unless it's specifically agreed to otherwise. So, but of course, it's better to do it the way you're doing it and Megan is doing it here by disclosing upfront. That's part of the intent. So.
Do you also
Yeah,
have to
thank you.
add like, say I was the buyer, Christina Livingston, and or assigns, you have to have that, right?
You don't. It's always best
you
to have
don't?
it. Just no, if
Okay.
you don't, in Massachusetts at least, if you don't have it, it's still doable, still assignable. So,
Okay.
yep. But it's
But
always
you
better
wanna,
to put that up front. What's that?
but you wouldn't hurt if you put it out of precaution.
And you don't want to
No,
surprise the seller, right?
Exactly. You want to be, you're trying to be full disclosure with the seller so that they can't come back later and try to say, well, I didn't know that. So, but just in case it's forgotten or overlooked, it's still assignable unless you specifically agree to otherwise. So the second thing was just for me to jump on that bandwagon about buyers in that one paragraph. I think there's still one spelling error in one of the word buyers. Just so
Probably. I'll
Yeah.
run a spell check on this one again.
Yeah, it just needs an E. The one, I think it's the
Oh, I did. I just
possessive.
fixed that while you were doing it. I fixed it while you were doing it. Yep.
Oh, great. And then
Awesome.
the third thing, just quickly, where it says financing is not a part of this deal, where there's a potential in some of the deals for seller financing, which would be a key part of a particular transaction. Do you want to say, right, 23, agreement is not contingent on buyer obtaining traditional financing? Would that be worth adding, the word traditional?
I would say with the exception of
Creative?
the terms and conditions as outlined in the
Yep.
seller installment sale above, something like that,
Yep.
right?
I like that. Yep. Great. That's it.
That's 2.
All right. Anybody else?
I have another question.
Yeah.
You might have gone over this when my internet dropped. What if the seller digs their heels in and wants to use their attorney?
They can.
You can.
What happens then? Absolutely should.
Okay.
What happened on
I've-
Timmy?
I think
Yeah.
we've been in that
Go ahead,
situation.
Dickens.
We've been in that
Mhm.
situation, seller, at the point when I think it was my Webster deal. Seller agree, but so divorce couple, the wife wanted their attorney to oversee the contract. We send it. We say, okay, have it seen by your attorney, and I told Megan that. And Megan double check with the attorney. Attorney, give their okay, and attorney was just overseeing the contract, not representing them, and then pull back, and then they'll continue.
So that's one,
I
right? And let's go the bad case scenario, right? Seller shows their attorney looks at this and rips it to pieces, and they send it back, right? And say your deposit's too small, and this is all bullshit, and this doesn't protect my client, this and that. He shouldn't do this deal. So then what happens to the seller, right? What's your relationship to that seller versus the attorney, right? I totally respect that, Mr. Attorney and Mr. Seller. I totally get this is what it looks like to you, but this is our standard agreement. We use this in all of our transactions, and we specifically tailored it to the needs of your client that we've been working with now for several weeks. We've been having multiple conversations with them. I understand you want all these changes to be made. Unfortunately, that's just not how we do business. We use the same. You can go through and say, we'll change this and this and this and this, but unfortunately, these 4 things or 5 things that you want us to change, this is not doable for us because that's just not how we operate. We're an investment company and we have certain standards, and these are a few of those. So the whole point is, right, who controls the transaction? The client, right? The client can choose to accept or not accept their attorney's recommendations. Do attorneys mess up deals? 100%. 90% of the deals when an attorney touches it, right? What's the safest thing an attorney can tell their client? Don't do it. Safest thing they can tell their client. They're off the hook because they told their client not to do it. It would be dangerous if an attorney looked at an investor's friendly contract and told their client, yeah, this looks good. So of course they're going to make changes, and of course they're going to go and revise some things. So it's really on you, your conversations with that seller. And if the attorney's insisting, and you tell the seller, hey, look, based on everything we went through, I was really hoping we can make this work. But unfortunately, your attorney seems to be doing everything they can to kill this one. Do you still want to move forward with me as what we discussed, or would you rather listen to them? In which case, I can probably hook you up with a good realtor. We can get you on the open market. You can deal with the open houses. You can deal with the showings. You can deal with the financings. You can deal with all the stuff we talked about.
Nick, I would even go one step further and say that having or suggesting the seller get their own attorney should be encouraged, especially with creative financing or seller financing type deals. It's well worth it down the road if they try to say they didn't understand, if they had their own attorney prior to and at closing, than to try to do it without that and have them later say, well, I wasn't represented. It's a good investment. Even like you said, if it tends to mess up the occasional deal.
Especially, you mentioned seller financing, right? Especially, right? Again, so
Yes.
Megan won't touch these, or you probably won't touch them unless there's a seller counsel on a subject to or creative finance deal. When there's financing involved, they absolutely need to have their attorney. When it comes to in Massachusetts, it's an attorney state, right? So pretty much everyone is encouraged to have attorneys because that's, as Alan mentioned, half the legislature, 75% of the legislature actually are all licensed attorneys. So they're going to keep themselves in business for another 50 years.
And I recommend it even when I'm dealing with our national group that does creative all over the country. I still recommend that they encourage sellers on creative financing deals to get their own attorney, their own representation. Yep.
Absolutely. Just know that there's probably things in this contract, right, that attorney's going to have a problem with. And therefore, make sure you have your script down to what to say once that comes back to you. And you're going back to the seller. Right, you're going back to the seller. If the attorney and you can't come up with anything, or the attorney and your attorney can't come up with anything, you go back to your rapport and your relationship and the picture perfect scenario you have painted for your seller. Mr. Seller, I really wish we could come to an agreement. It turns out like your attorney needs a few certain things. We bent on a lot of those things, but the rest of them, this is just how we do business. And based on everything we talked about, based on us getting you to where you want to be in the time frame you want with all the terms that you wanted, we still want to do that, but we're not able to budge on these certain things. Like, how do you feel about them? And are you okay if we proceed with everything we've already discussed?
Great.
Cool.
Nick,
I
just
know we're running
quickly,
short on, oh, yeah.
I just want to know, you said the REI Ignition course library, or is it REI Acceleration course library? We could find this?
See, REI Ignition will have this in the Facebook group.
Yep.
And REI Accelerated will have this. Obviously, everyone at Accelerated has access to the Ignition Facebook group, but they're also going to have that in this video in the digital course library. You guys will have this in Ignition as well. So this will be in the Facebook group. It's also going to be in the Accelerated digital course library for you guys to look up and index.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Nick, I got a
Brilliant.
question.
Yes, sir.
As a wholesaler, is that a line where you can, ask to everybody to use your lawyer as the point person? Because I remember one deal that we did, the seller's lawyer didn't know anything about wholesaling, and they were drafting everything. They messed up everything.
Why was the seller drafting everything?
I don't remember, but the seller's lawyer, I think it was also Webster. The lawyer didn't know about wholesaling and things like that, and and then
Of course
because I don't remember the
of course
story,
they don't,
but
right?
yeah, and they mess up everything. That's what I remember. I had the debriefing with Meg after and say, hey, next time, you're gonna be the point person, whether they're representing or not. You're gonna be the point person. Is that a way to put in our contract?
So what we do, that's a great question. What we do when we say the escrow period, right? So they like to know that there's an actual escrow agent. We say, we use, these attorneys, Allard and Bose, as our escrow agents. They work as facilitators on this transaction as well if you have basic questions, but they don't represent you, right? So we have that, we mention that when we have this part, when we have the escrow conversation. That said, yeah, these sellers either do or don't have the means to get an attorney, and they should be absolutely getting some legal representation if it's going to be a complex deal, right? As Alan mentioned, so you can always, as an agent, right, we're taught we have to recommend the attorney. We're taught that. Again, that's Massachusetts rhetoric to keep the attorneys around. Love you, Alan. But at the same time, right, like, can you force one attorney to the seller? No, you can't.
No, I don't want to force them an attorney. I just want the transaction to be, the closing to be handled by Meg, by my attorney.
Yep. So in that case, right, remember who controls the closing? The money.
The money, yeah.
Right. So if you are a wholesaler in that transaction, you don't control the money. Your end buyer controls the money in the financing.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why in that contract, right? That's a whole conversation that's for the next period, right? In the contract, if you're doing A to B, this is the A to B contract, and now you have a B to C purchase and sale agreement. That contract, right, has to match every single contingency in this one, but we also then put in there, right, required to use, let's say, Allard and Bose PC as the escrow agent. But we go beyond that now, as you learned in the meeting last night, we talked about it, right? People will sign that contract, and yet still they're using Enterprise Bank or Chase Bank for the financing. So that immediately kicks out the escrow agent. Allard and Bose is no longer escrow agent at that moment. Now it's the bank's closing attorney. Does that make sense? So now you don't control the escrow. You don't control any of that. So what we did last night, what we offered last night is it gets to be really powerful when you get to have relationships in each state with individual hard money or non-conventional lenders. And those lenders are using your title company or using your preferred attorney. Therefore, you're controlling and say, hey, listen, Mr. Buyers, we are requiring you to use either cash or hard money with these three hard money lenders, right? And then if they use those three, you know who's going to be the escrow agent. You know that you're controlling the escrow as well to make the transaction way easier, right? Or you can say, we require you to use cash, and we'll, give a $5,000. If you're making a spread of 25,000 or more, you say we're gonna give a $5,000 credit to you at closing if you use these three hard money lenders or cash. So you get to choose. We require. Well, I have my money in Enterprise Bank. Great. Then just, come in cash and you can, and it's not a problem. Right? Or I have my money in Enterprise Bank. Okay, well, we're going to require an additional $10,000 from you because you're not using our escrow agent.
Okay.
You can do stuff like that. Commercial, everything's negotiable, right? That's the whole side, though. This is not your conversation with the seller. That's a conversation with the buyer. So I know we're way over time, you guys, and that's a great topic, Dickens, right? We talked about that last night. We're way over time. I want to thank everybody for this ignition call. Thank you guys for hanging in with the tactical conversation. And what we're going to do is, as we said, make this available to REI Ignition folks. There's going to be some REI Unleashed folks, too, that are coming in to take a look at us. And I know we'll have a warm welcome for anybody who decides to join us in our tribe here. But thank you all for a powerful conversation. It's Wednesday. We'll see you in the next Wednesday call. Make it and do some shit. Do some really impactful things that move your needle in your finance, in your family, in your faith. Well, I'm giving it quiet. There's some kids around because I used some bad words. I like it. I like it, Dickens. I'm triggered. Appreciate you guys. Talk to you in a bit.
Take care.
Bye.